Hey y'all, Coach in the Fight here, talking about Tu B'Av and its relationship to the Sabbath day. In this video, we're going to show you how to determine that Tu B'Av is in fact a Sabbath day. And we're going to show you some of the rules associated with this day and all Sabbath days. We're also going to show you the importance of the Sabbath day with relationship to our salvation, the Rapture, the Third Temple, the New Covenant, New Jerusalem, and even the spirit of Elijah and the Great Awakening. In today's class, we're going to be talking about how Tu B'Av is in fact a Sabbath day. Now, these are among the most important subjects that you will find on our channel. Besides learning how to pray, feast days and holy days and Sabbath days, as well as the obedience to the law, is the main focus of our channel. We are what you will call the repairers of the breach, as you read over there in Isaiah chapter 58. We are repairing the paths to dwell in. And we understand that the path to the kingdom of heaven goes through the feast days, the holy days, the Sabbath days, obedience to the law, and effective prayers. So let's talk about Tu B'Av. Yesterday's class was a bit of an introduction on Tu B'Av, the 15th day of the 5th sacred month. We talked about various subjects in that class, but one of the things that our father brought out to me during the making of that class is how Tu B'Av is in fact a Sabbath day. Now we're looking here at a biblical calendar that I am drawing up for the 5th month. Now I have done several classes on the Sabbath day on our channel. How to determine when that day falls using the luminaries. So you can see those other classes, and I don't want to go into much detail in this one, as it is not the focus of this class. But let me briefly tell you how this works. The sacred calendar, or the Hebrew calendar, or some call it the Enoch calendar. Like you read over there in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 14, our Father's calendar is based on the luminaries, the sun, the moon, and the stars. In fact, the word month comes from the word moon. Just add another O in there and you get month. This is how the sacred months are determined, by the moon. The way the ancient people did it and the way we still do it today is we verify the first sighting of the new moon, that sliver of the moon that you see each month. Each month, Levites and priests and other individuals go out and put their eyes on that sliver of the moon and then start making announcements to the others around them that a new month has started. We're going to find out in this class how that day, that first day of the month, the new moon day, is actually a sacred day. It's not necessarily a work day, because as we see over here in Ezekiel chapter 46 and verse 1, the inner courts of the sanctuary are opened during the new moon day. This makes it very similar to a Sabbath day. These are very important times when we think about the third temple, that temple built on the hearts of humanity, that temple that dwells in our conscience. Well, on the new moon day and on the Sabbath day, the inner court of that sanctuary is open. So it is a day of worship, a day of celebration, a day of spiritual renewal we'll find in other sacred texts. But one thing it is not is a full-fledged work day. That doesn't start until the second day of the month. On the second of the month, you'll start your work week. You'll work 6 days, and then on the 7th day, you'll have a Sabbath day. But notice how the 7th work day falls on the 8th day of the month. The 8th day of the month is a Sabbath day. You'll repeat the cycle and you'll end up with the 15th day of the month being a Sabbath day as well. Where it just so happens that in the 5th month, the 15th day of the 5th month is Tu B'Av. Therefore, Tu B'Av is a Sabbath day. Every Tu B'Av is a Sabbath day. So in this class, we want to talk about the Sabbath day. We do many classes on our channel letting you know about dates. The dates of Pentecost, Tabernacles, Passover, just about every biblical date we'll come in and we'll let you know, including new moon days and Sabbath days. But like I've said in several videos, what good does it do you to know the date of these events if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing on those days? If you know that the concert starts on the 15th day of the month, but you don't have a ticket or a way to get there, what difference does it make? So let's talk about the Sabbath day as we prepare for Tu B'Av. Now, the first thing I want to do, I want to take you back to one of the earliest scriptural accounts of the Sabbath day. You don't hear much about the Sabbath day until you get to Moses' time, when you see it given as a commandment over in the book of Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11 gives detail of the Sabbath day as part of the Ten Commandments. But remember that Exodus chapter 20 is the first chapter of what's called the Book of the Covenant. This is the covenant that we are in now as we await the new covenant, when the laws are actually written on our heart. Well, Exodus chapter 20 through 24 are the laws that will be written on our heart when that new covenant comes down. Don't let people fool you when they say that the new covenant did away with the old covenant. The only difference between the new covenant and the old covenant is the way they are written. The first covenant was written on stone tablets. The new covenant will be written on our hearts, but they will both say the same thing. They will both involve the law, and they will both stress the Sabbath day. So let's come over here and let's look at the book of Jasher. Now, Jasher is scriptural text. It's inspired writings, no different than what you would find in the 66 books of the Bible, but it is one of the books that didn't make the canon, which to me doesn't take anything away from the credibility of the book, because it was the Catholic Church that decided what books will be counted in the canon. Not our Father that inspired these books, but the Pope. But when you look over here in the book of Joshua chapter 10 and 2 Samuel chapter 1, you see the word Jasher listed here. It's talking about the book of Jasher. It's actually referencing the book of Jasher, as you can see here on your screen. So let's go over here and let's look at the book of Jasher and look at the most earliest account of the Sabbath day. Considering that you don't even see the word Sabbath listed until Exodus chapter 16, which is after the children of Israel had left Egypt, you can see over here in the book of Jasher that Moses and our father had already established the Sabbath day well before they even left Egypt. This is extremely important when you think about how this all went down. You can read it here on the screen if you want to, but what it's talking about is how after the children of Israel has started to cry out to our father for help, for all of the troubles that they were receiving at the hands of Pharaoh, the first thing that our Father did is had them to start keeping the Sabbath day. Even before the plagues, Moses went in to the Pharaoh, you see there in verse 43 of chapter 70 of the book of Jasher, and asked him to allow the people to keep a Sabbath day, one day of rest therein from their labor. That's a Sabbath day. You see in verse 46 that Pharaoh ordered the proclamation to be issued that for 6 days work shall be done, but the seventh day shall be a day of rest. You see in verse 49 that this thing was from the Lord to the children of Israel, for the Lord had begun to remember the children of Israel to save them for the sake of their fathers. So how important is this? The first thing that our Father did when it came time to save the children of Israel was to establish the Sabbath day. I believe this is how it's going to work in our time today. One of the first things that our Father is going to do with us is to reestablish the Sabbath day. Let me show you some proof of that hypothesis. First of all, let's look over here at the book of Malachi and chapter 4. This is the last book of the Old Testament, even the last chapter of the Old Testament. And you can see here that he's talking about Elijah. Now, Elijah is an extremely important figure in our end times. I've done a couple of classes on Elijah. If you're not familiar with Elijah, I would advise you to go in and look at those classes to see how important this guy is. There was a reason while doing the transfiguration on Mount Tabor back there with the Messiah that Elijah was standing beside Moses and our Messiah. It is because of how important his role is in the end times. Just to put it very briefly, Elijah is the spirit behind the 144,000 that you hear about so much. These people will have the indwelling of the Elijah spirit. Well, let's look here in Malachi chapter 4 and see how that will all take place. Let's see why they will be touched by an angel, so to speak. You see instructions here in verse 4 of Malachi chapter 4 when it says, remember the law of Moses with the statutes and the judgments. He's telling them to remember the law of Moses which he commanded them at Mount Horeb. Now this is the book of the covenant that we were just talking about. Exodus chapter 20 through 24. Those were the instructions that they got there at Mount Horeb. The 2 tablets of stone that was given to Moses were given to Moses on Mount Horeb. So he's telling us that if we want the indwelling of the Elijah spirit, we have to obey the law of Moses, along with the statutes and the judgments. So in chapter 20 of the book of Exodus, you get the commandments, which includes the Sabbath day. In chapter 21, you get the judgments. So then you say, well, where are the statutes? They are included in the book of the covenant as well, but if you want all of the statutes in one place, you have to jump over to Leviticus chapter 23. A statute is a requirement to live in a certain kingdom. Most of us listening to this video live in the United States, and we can think of some of the statutes or requirements for being a U.S. citizen. Well, the kingdom of heaven also has statutes or requirements, and we can see those over in Leviticus 23. And what is the first one that's talked about? The Sabbath day. The Sabbath day is the first statute. So this is one of the reasons why I believe that the reestablishment of the Sabbath day on our Father's people here in the end times will be one of the first steps when it comes to New Jerusalem or the third temple. See, the Sabbath day is a sign between us and our Father. We can see that over there in Exodus chapter 31 and 13. When it says, verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations. Now, there are many people that you can see that's claiming to be our Father's people. But the only way to know for sure if you are the Father's people or not is if you are actually keeping the Sabbath day. That's what this verse is saying right here in verse 13. A sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord that does sanctify you. That's the same thing repeated over here in Ezekiel chapter 20 and verse 12. I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they may know that I am the Lord that sanctified them. Ezekiel 20 and 20 says, and hallow my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. So if you don't keep the Sabbaths, you don't really know the Lord our God. Now, before you think about clicking off of this video, maybe you should think about actually keeping the Sabbath day, if you haven't been doing so already. There are significant blessings associated with keeping the Sabbath day, as we see over in Isaiah chapter 58, verses 13 and 14. Verse 13 is telling us if we start to do the Sabbath day correctly, putting away our own pleasure, and taking delight in our Father's holy day, honoring our Father on that day, not doing our will, but finding pleasure in His will, and speaking His words. Verse 14 says, then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon high places on the earth. So this is further proof that the Sabbath day will be one of, if not the first thing that our Father does for us as He establishes the kingdom of heaven on our hearts. The Sabbath day comes first. Once we start doing the Sabbath day correctly, we can expect all of these blessings we see here in verse 14. See, we're waiting for what's called the Great Awakening. You hear people talk about this when they're saying things like Third Temple, New Jerusalem, the Rapture, or the New Covenant. This will be a mystical experience in which the Spirit is exalted to a knowledge of divine things. In other words, our spirit man is going to be awoken inside of us. This is what's talked about over here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, where it's talking about the Lord Himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and where it goes on to say that we shall be caught up together with them in the clouds. This is referring to the great spiritual awakening. This is also what's being talked about over there in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, as it's talking about how we shall all be changed. This change that's going to occur is going to be in our conscience. See, right now, for the majority of humanity, our conscience is dormant. It takes much effort for us to hear our conscience. Even in times where we diligently want to know the difference between right or wrong, we have to spend time meditating and praying in order to hear our conscience. Well, that's going to change. After the Great Awakening, our conscience is going to have a huge effect on people. This is what Daniel chapter 12 is talking about when it says, some shall awake to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So when that spirit man is awoken, when our conscience is awoken, some of us are going to be exalted, while others are going to go into shame and contempt. The difference will be whether one has kept the law or not. Those that have been obedient to the law will awake to everlasting life, while those who have rejected the law and His commandments will awaken to shame and contempt. This is all pointing back over to Malachi chapter 4. Elijah will be a huge part of this great awakening, and it's telling us there in verse 4, if we want to arise to everlasting life, we have to obey the law, the statutes, and the judgments. Now, Daniel chapter 12 is probably one of the places in the scripture that you can get the most detail about what the Great Awakening will be like, with the exception of probably only the Third Testament of the Bible, which you can find a link to in the description of this video. This is the one place that you can get the most information about the Great Awakening. The Third Temple, New Jerusalem, the Rapture. You can run over and read Daniel chapter 12 at your own leisure, but one of the things that I want to point out is down here in verse 10. It's talking about how knowledge will increase in those times, or these times. Everyone is not going to have the same experience. Like we said, some will awaken to everlasting life, while others will awaken to shame and remorse. Well, Daniel here is also telling you which will be which. In the King James Version of the Bible, he uses the word wicked and says that the wicked will not understand. In other words, the wicked are not going to have the same experience as those who are not wicked. Well, when you look at the Septuagint translation of the Old Testament, it doesn't use the word wicked. It says transgressors, talking about the transgressors of the law, and how the transgressors of the law shall transgress, and none of the transgressors of the law shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Again, pointing us over here to Malachi chapter 4. The people who are transgressing the law of Moses and not keeping the statutes and the judgments are the wicked that Daniel is talking about. And they're not going to understand. There's one verse in the Old Testament, I have to look it up, that says that you will not be able to obey the rest of the commandments or the laws if you don't keep the Sabbath day. And here we are getting ready for Tu B'Av, which falls on a Sabbath day. We should be looking to keep this day correctly, honor the Sabbath day. So in the last part of this video, let's look at some of the rules associated with the Sabbath day. Now, we see many of the rules associated with the Sabbath day given over in the Book of the Covenant, particularly in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 through 11. You can read that at your leisure. But if we want more details on what it is that we're supposed to be doing and not doing on the Sabbath day, we have to jump over to the book of Jubilees in chapter 50. There is a link to this book in the description of this video. But let's summarize some of these verses here dealing with the Sabbath day. We see here in verse 7 that we are to do no manner of work on the Sabbath day. But you also see that this goes for our children, people that work for us, our animals or our livestock, or even people that are visiting with us. Everybody and everything has to rest on the Sabbath day. You see right here in verse 8, it says, "And the man that does any work on it shall die." See, this reminds me of the story of Adam and Eve. When Eve was about to transgress the commandment given to Adam not to eat of the tree of knowledge, she was facing death. Our Father had told Adam if and when they ate of that tree that they would die. They ate of the tree. Did they die? Yes. They suffered a spiritual death. It wasn't a physical death, and that's how Eve was able to be tricked. Eve didn't understand that it wasn't her body that was going to die. It was going to be a spiritual separation from her and the Father, which is a spiritual death. Well, this is what happens when we transgress the law. When we break any of the law, we create a separation between our Father, a spiritual death. And so as you read in those comments down in the videos, it's people talking about how the Father has done away with the law and how we're not supposed to be keeping the law. Realize that the people who are talking to you are in what's called a spiritual death. In fact, most of humanity is in this spiritual death, but when we start to keep these commandments, particularly the Sabbath day, we will be reawoken. So they suffered a spiritual death. But look right here. It's talking about anybody who desecrates or violates that day, they will die also. Whoever lies with his wife on the Sabbath day will die. You can't even say you're going to do a thing on the Sabbath day. Like have a meeting about the work that you're going to do the day after the Sabbath day. That's forbidden. You can't leave to go on a trip on the Sabbath day. It's one thing to be on a trip during the Sabbath day, but what this is saying is that you can't start the trip. You can't set out on a journey on the Sabbath day. And then it says that there's no buying or selling on the Sabbath day. And of course that means going down to the Walmart, but it also means shopping on eBay on the Sabbath day. You see right here where it says that we're not allowed to draw water on the Sabbath day? Now, for many people, this is what lends to the idea that the old commandments were antiquated. Because they're like, who is drawing water? We just turn on a faucet and it runs. Well, there are still people out here who are carrying buckets of water. Well, you see here that if you're going to need water, you need to carry it the day before. You're not allowed to draw that water on the Sabbath day. And then it goes on to say, whosoever takes up his burden to carry out of his tent or out of his house shall die. Meaning you can't leave your property where they're honoring the Sabbath day and go somewhere else and do your work. The Sabbath day applies even where it is that you think you might be going. Then you see right here in verse 9 that it is a requirement that we eat and drink on the Sabbath day. It is against the sabbatical rules to go without eating and without drinking. It is a festival day. So you have to prepare your food ahead of time so that those who normally cook the food can rest on that day as well. You see that the Sabbath day is a day for eating, drinking, resting, honoring the Lord or reading his word, praying, meditating, and that kind of thing. Now, like we saw over there in the book of Ezekiel chapter 46, that there are some things that's going on behind the scenes on the Sabbath day. You can read about some of those in verses 10 or 11. Those don't pertain to everybody, so we won't talk on those too much. But look down here, verse 12. It's talking about the death penalty for breaking the Sabbath day. Anybody who does any work, goes on a journey, tills his farm or tills his field. So you're not even allowed to do any gardening work on the Sabbath day. Notice it says, whether in his house or in any other place. So even if you are sojourning somewhere else, you still have to honor the Sabbath day. Or whosoever lights a fire or rides on any beast. So you're not even allowed to ride your horse on the Sabbath day or light a fire. That may be a good smoker cessation day, or at least find a different way to get your cigarette lit on the Sabbath day. As an aside note, I believe that that's why many of us are trapped with an addiction of smoking, is because at some point we lit a cigarette on the Sabbath day. But that's just my thoughts. We need to be careful because we are subject to death if we get this wrong. Travels by ship on the sea, or strikes or kills anything. I have a lot of children, and we have one rule in our house when it comes to the Sabbath days and spankings. If you do something that warrants a butt whooping on the Sabbath day, because of this rule right here, you're not going to get that butt whooping on the Sabbath day. But after the Sabbath day ends, you're going to get double. That's our rule. That's a family rule. We're not allowed to slaughter any animals or birds on the Sabbath day, or even catch an animal or a bird or a fish on the Sabbath day. So whereas we might find fishing relaxing, we're not supposed to go fishing on the Sabbath day. And then we see that we're not allowed to fast or make war on the Sabbath day. It says that whoever does any of these things shall die. So I just wanted to share this with you guys, being that we are approaching Tu B'Av, which falls on a Sabbath day. And of course, everybody wants to be doing the right thing in these times. We're getting too close to the end to be messing around and making mistakes. So everybody wants to know what to do. So I shared this video with you. If you got something out of this video, hit the like button. But also consider sharing this video. Maybe in your Facebook or your Twitter. Imagine the good that you could do if you were to post this on your Facebook account and somebody watches this video and hearkens to the message. You could actually save somebody's life. So consider sharing and leave a comment. All of those actions help spread the word. And in these times we live in, the word really needs to be spread. Hit the subscribe button or that bell notification button if you haven't done so already. And may our Father bless you and keep you. May our Father make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May our Father lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace.